gentlemen, welcome to this late evening session, and thank you all for the interest and all being here with us today. I am Victor Berishai, the Energy and Climate Policy Coordinator for Southeast Europe from Climate Action Network Europe. Tonight, we will discuss the efforts that were prompted from the declaration on the green agenda, on the European Green Deal, that we need a united Europe to actually reach the obligations of the Paris Agreement. Now, the neighbors of the European Union are a key player in all of this. And tonight, to discuss this, we have our special guests, the Deputy Prime Minister Olha Stefanishyna from Ukraine, the Director of the Energy Community Treaty, Mr. Janez Kopač, the Head of International Relations Unit from DG Klima, Ms. Elina Bardram. We have the Secretary of State of Montenegro for Energy and Mining, Mr. Marko Perunović, Corina Zierlot from the European Trade Union Industrial, and online will join us live from Belgrade, Mirjana Jovanović, who is the Energy and Climate Program Manager at the Belgrade Open School. Okay, since we have a lot of audience who want to know more about the Energy Community Treaty is a legally binding treaty put forth by the European Union in cooperation with its neighbors. The aim of the treaty is to reach out and create a pan-European energy market. Now, for many contracting parties, the Energy Community Treaty is actually the driving force behind the energy transition. And because we have to admit that the highest level of emissions actually come from the energy sector. Within the energy community, as it started as the Energy Community Treaty, it has evolved in such a way to actually address the current issues that are at hand, and that is the natural integration of the climate issues in the relationship in the same family with the energy one. Within this context, the European Commission is working with the Energy Community Treaty to deliver a study on the 2030 targets, which will allow them to have extending the European Union modeling for these targets, so we can actually be in cohesion with one another. Furthermore, to build on this momentum, the Energy Community Treaty's Ministerial Council, the highest body last year, announced that they want to work on the decarbonization roadmap that would bring the contracting parties in line with the EU's goals regarding climate. This is a lot of work and a lot of things to actually happen ahead of us. But we have to take into account what is the situation actually in the region. Many contracting parties from the Western Balkans and from the whole energy community, but in particularly from Western Balkans, heavily rely on coal for energy production. Their technology is very much outdated, causing environmental, financial, and health problems. When I say environmental, I mean the huge amount of the greenhouse gas emissions and pollutants that these coal power plants emit. When I say financial, we have to take into account that all of this coal business costs money, and from 2015 to 2019, the coal-dependent contracting parties have actually subsidized coal by 2.1 billion euros. And when I say health, we have to take into account how much this pollution is actually costing the citizens and respectively the countries in the region. The recent studies from the emissions of the coal power plants in the Western Balkans, the health bill is from 6 to 12 billion euros only for 2020, which extends beyond the Western Balkans and also into the European Union countries. But I do not want to be grim, but I wanted to pay paint a little bit of picture and the context in which we are and what we can actually do. Everyone is talking about reaching some kind of a net zero, but I want to say that we are now, although that work has been done, we are now at 0 point and we want to reach hero. So how we go from 0 to hero in the energy community and reach the decarbonization goal by 2050. I will first direct my questions to the Deputy Prime Minister of Ukraine. Ukraine is the biggest emitter in the energy community, contracting party, but it is also one of the first ones who actually introduced the carbon pricing, which nevertheless is very low to compare to other countries. There is nevertheless a very interesting news coming out in the last couple of days. Besides that, the Ukrainian current decarbonization goal is to 2060. We saw that Ukraine actually is planning to phase out coal by 2035. And the largest private investor in coal in Ukraine, DTEC, plans to phase out coal by 2040. So I believe that it is in order that that Ukraine works on the revised NDC, but this is also plan and what is included in the now drafting of the energy strategy in Ukraine. Is this part of that?
Thank you so much. Let me bring from the very beginning a bit of clarity in what you're saying. Ukraine is the biggest country, a part of the European Union in the energy community, which is the territory of which is bigger than the some of the territories of the countries. And we have a very strong industrial heritage from the Soviet Union, and thus which is affected to a strong industrial lobbies and big companies basically forming the monopolies in the specific markets in Ukraine. But indeed, I think that the whole past year, which has brought Ukraine here to COP26, has been the one changing the game inside of the country. A year ago, we couldn't even imagine that Ukrainian industries would form their strategies of reaching climate neutrality, and they will be even more ambitious than the one the government has approved, because the government of Ukraine has declared the goal of reaching climate neutrality by 2060, while five largest industrial companies of Ukraine has declared 2050 climate neutrality goal. And indeed, the whole dialogue, which has been affected in Ukraine by its ambition to align its policy with the European Green Deal policy, but also to have the ambitious NDC, has boosted a very strong and very complicated discourse inside of a country, which has led to still very ambitious consensus we had. We have submitted a goal to cut the 65 to reach the 65% reduction of emissions by 2030, and this is one of the most ambitious goals we were taking, and we still already supported by our industries, not only the steel and energy and cement sector, but also those industries who are willing to invest in innovations and renewables. But still, there is a number of issues we're putting a very specific focus on, and this is what you were also mentioning, taking into account the regional context. First of all, we declared that the goal, which has been stated in the second NDC, depends not only from Ukraine but also from such big players like European Union and other countries, because we are permanently facing a severe hybrid gas warfare from Russian Federation on our territory, and we're permanently under the threat of being deprived from our right of being a principal gas transit country. So there is little of clarity in terms of the policy in that area. So this is something which really affects our planning. We also, as a member and a party to the energy community, but also as a country having one of the most ambitious association agreements with the European Union, has self-committed to align ourselves with the European market rules when it comes to the energy sector, and this is one of the principal goals of the energy community. So for us, it's really important that having in mind that Ukraine has significantly proceeded in terms of regulatory approximation, energy community and European Union would start having a bilateral dialogue in terms of the market integration that would really allow us to have a more long-term planning in terms of diversification of our market. And there is another condition which is really important and not only depending on Ukraine is synchronization with the electricity network and integration of Ukraine into the ENSOE, which is, I think, the most mutually beneficial element when we're talking about uniting our efforts with the European Union in terms of reaching the goal of decarbonization. This synchronization is really vital because it would, from one side, ensure the need of the European countries and the growing demand on electricity, while it will allow Ukraine to diversify its exports. So speaking about the regional context, there is a number of issues I mentioned which do not depend solely from Ukraine to meet these ambitions. While, of course, we have calculated that it would require us to mobilize annually around 10 billion of euros to meet this ambition, which partially would be the state budget, the state aid programs, but also a number of loans and investments. That's why on the sidelines of the COP26, we're actively working with the IFIs, but also joining a number of initiatives like on the cutting the methane emissions, but also on the forestry to make sure that our efforts are united and the investments are mobilized to our country. But there was also a very complicated experience of building the discourse within our country when it comes to the carbon pricing. As you were mentioning, we were one of the first countries who has already introduced the carbon tax, which is relatively low, and now our parliament is considering the possibility to increase it 3 times with the gradual perspective of its increasing further. And we hope that that in our dialogue with the European institutions, it will be taken into account while introducing the carbon border adjustment mechanisms, because for Ukraine, CBAM and our internal carbon pricing is something which goes not only within environmental context, it has a very strong trade and economic dimension, because basically since 2014, Ukraine has fully withdrew from its dependence from the Russian market, and European and Chinese market are the main export directions for us, while Ukraine has fully aligned its internal market routes with the ones when it comes to the competition energy sector, some of the elements of technical regulations and so on and so forth. So for us, predictability and clarity and preserving at least existing dynamics in our bilateral trade and economics is very important. So basically imposing any measures which would have an immediate effect to our trade and economic development is something which would negatively serve our economic integration as part of the important political goals of our dialogue. But still, we have declared ourselves as a constructive partner, and we are looking forward for the further developments in the European Parliament. And we are happy that already being a member of European Union and free trade area with European Union country, there is some discussions on the equivalency calculations are being there in the European Parliament, and I call on the energy community to play a proactive role of the advocate of us, members of the energy community, those countries who have committed themselves to the European market rule and aligning with this market, to make sure that our interests are preserved and the goals of the energy community treaty are taken into account while the decisions are taken. I will stop here. I have another 10 bullets to say, because this is a really hot topic in Kiev, but I think that these are like the essential elements I wanted to put my focus on.
Thank you very much. We will come back with few questions more after this, but now to Director Kopac. The energy community has been crucial instrument in the energy transition and ambition of its contracting parties. Now we have the inclusion of the climate acquis, and we are working on the cohesion between the energy and climate issues. What are the next steps for the energy community towards reaching a climate resilient continent by 2050?
Thanks, Victor, and thanks for invitation and organizing this. Energy community was established in very romantic times, back in 2006, when Western Balkan countries were all hoping to become members of European Union very soon. This is why it was established for 10 years only. But then some of them really became members, Bulgaria, Romania, Croatia, and all the others are somehow stuck in the process, and this is becoming more and more evident. So there is no internal push, because in first years they were very eager to align the legislation, the legislative framework with European Union's one, but this became less and less relevant. Then we started with an idea of treaty amendments. I started it back in 2013, and there we introduced also this a fee, a payment for non-compliance. And back in 2018, we reached a consensus among all contracting parties. They agreed with this, despite it was a little bit painful. But then this process was taken over by Commission, and there were, of course, many events and discussions in European Council, and this then was prolonged. Then COVID came, and these treaty amendments now are really stuck and nowhere. So this process should be completely restarted or refreshed, because there are very many amendments which are practically not necessary. There are only 2-3 really important issues that count and are important for full implementation of the Energy Community Treaty. But what is also important is, with losing this European perspective, or European membership perspective of these countries, mechanisms of cooperation should be refreshed. What I published earlier this year, it was an idea of, I called it Marshall Fund for Decarbonization. Because existing financial assistance of European Union to energy community contracting parties was designed 20, even more years ago. And it is completely non-adapted to current, let's say, Green Deal times or decarbonization times. For example, just to illustrate, Western Balkans has a little bit more, I would say, user-friendly financial support through IPA funds. Eastern Partnership countries have this indirect financial support through international financial institutions or organizations. Western Balkans has, for example, Western Balkans Investment Framework. There is possible to get to co-finance something by, let's say, up to 20% or 30% or even less. But this is all classical infrastructure: schools, even prisons, cables, hospitals, and so on. There is nothing about decarbonization. And, for example, we talk a lot about coal regions in transition. Coal region in transition needs a very flexible budget because there are very many diverse needs to be financed. And European Union member states did this, many of them, through carbon pricing. They were ETS directive even envisages that at least 50% has to go for renewables, energy efficiency, and sustainable transport. In energy community contracting parties, there is the same expectation, decarbonization by 2050, but there is no rich EU budget, there is no just transition fund. There is nothing, and this simply doesn't work, you know. So I think that energy community contracting parties should establish carbon pricing as soon as possible. Of course, gradually increase it to the level of EU, but I think they should organize national funds separate from state budget, because otherwise it will not function. And these separate budgets should be awarded with additional top-up from European Union, and of course then co-managed by national authorities and European Union. We have such a model. It's Energy Efficiency Fund in Ukraine. I think it, after first problems, it functions quite well. It's a successful one, and I think that only this targeted financial support, again, without this internal drive to become member of EU very fast, only such stimulation can bring results in this major task of decarbonization of energy community contracting parties. It's pity we didn't start with carbon pricing years ago. Only a little bit Ukraine did, and Montenegro, because in those years the gap between EU and energy community contracting parties became deeper and deeper. And this is not, I mean, now it's very hard to integrate this into single energy market once again. There will be carbon border adjustment mechanism, okay, as a push to do something, but years were lost. And I think that, as I said, not only alignment of legal framework, but also redesign of financial assistance should be basis for this major task which is in front of us, decarbonization, I hope, till 2050 for energy community contracting parties. One sentence more on the importance of energy community. When energy community was established, the instrument was very clear. So to adopt an acquis, directives, regulations, at the same time for all the territory of the energy community. And this was functioning very well until now. Okay, Georgia is a little bit an exemption because it's geographically far away. But then there were years when European Union was somehow more favoring bilateral relations with Ukraine, Annex 27 to association agreement, with other countries, some different annexes. And this, because of procedures inside European Union, has to be ratified in so many parliaments. And when it is ratified, it is already outdated. In energy community, you adopt something and it is immediately implementable all around. And I think, and this is why I'm thankful to Elina, who will speak next, with this idea of decarbonization roadmap, which is prepared for this year's Ministerial Council, energy community will become useful in the way it was designed 15, 16 years ago again. And I'm optimist that this will bring back energy community contracting parties on the track of integration, but financial assistance should be redesigned. This is not on energy community contracting parties, it's only on EU. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Kopac. I know Ms. Bardram would like also to relate to this, and specifically for the challenges that Mr. Kopac actually just now mentioned. How can we ensure that the treaty is actually up we are not saying it's outdated, but what kind of tools should treaty be equipped with in order to ensure that the contracting parties of the energy community stay in line with the decarbonization goals of the EU?
Thanks very much, Victor. And it's really great to be here with the Deputy Prime Minister, with Janez and all the other distinguished panelists. And I think the energy community is a pertinent instrument, and it remains a pertinent instrument. I know, as Janez was saying, it's something that was devised at a dream time or dream era. And many things in the world have changed since that. Not least of all have we had Paris Agreement, which is something that for the first time brought 197 parties with very diverse backgrounds together, joined up, a first time ever in history, for a universal agreement applicable to all parties with nationally determined contributions intended to transform their economies once and for all. And that was a showing of force from the international community against the backdrop of international terrorism, bombings, and so much uncertainty that now, 6 years after the Paris conference, when we find ourselves in the place of recovery from the COVID, it's very rewarding to see that resolve, that determination remains intact. And I think instead of reinventing platforms, coming up with lots of new initiatives, we should work on those platforms that have been established, that are treaty-based, and that provide us with openings for forwarding the agenda in a joined-up way between partners that share ideological proximity, but also geographical proximity, which means that many of our geopolitical interests are very well aligned, and also need to be aligned in order for us to make a difference in the bigger geopolitical landscape. Now, all of this said, I mean, since 2017, there's been the establishment of Climate Change and Energy Committee, which has been a very useful platform for the contracting parties to exchange ideas. There's the permanent high-level working group, there's the Ministerial Council. All have taken up the discussion around the transposition of the acquis, getting the climate and energy policies better aligned, etc. But up until mid last year, etc., I still, whenever I attended the meetings, I felt it was still a little bit ad hocery, that we were stabbing a little bit there, and we were missing a blueprint. So we knew what needed to be done, but there was no clear sequence or timetable, kind of a work program that we could all agree on and that we could share and work towards. And therefore, together with the Energy Community Secretariat and the contracting parties, we've been working on a decarbonisation roadmap, and we have had almost 20 different level meetings this year alone to bring together the good thinking, the elements, but also the concerns of the different stakeholders in this process. And I think those meetings have been very useful in ensuring that we understand each other, that there is consensus about the value added of this approach, and that we all share the end objective, which would be, introduction of carbon pricing, ETS, market mechanisms in a way that would reach, if not equivalence, but comparative level of operational value added, and provide us with that injection of market-based instruments into the kind of budgets that need to be mobilized to serve the decarbonisation ambition and the agenda. So with all of that said, I think we're now in a very important point in time. There's going to be the next Ministerial Council on the 26th of November. And aside from the decarbonisation roadmap, we will have the governance package. The climate agenda is very much about transparency, governance, about integrity of action, and making sure that we each have confidence in those pledges that are being made being delivered, be it about the 2030 targets or be it about the 2050 carbon neutrality. I have no illusions about how easy this is going to be. It's going to be difficult for the EU, and it's going to be very difficult for the contracting parties to aspire into this agenda. And we're talking about nothing less than a transformative structural change in our economy, in our industry, in the way we produce, consume, and the way we think about what are valuable attributes in the citizen daily life. And I think that societal transformation, the transformation of mindsets, needs to be driven from the central government, from the planning agencies. Because if the agenda is not internalized, if the governments themselves in the contracting parties are not convinced that this transformation makes sense, any externally imposed ideas, funds, or whatever is not going to build the benefits. So for us to succeed, we need visible evidence of the government's long-term commitment, short-term commitment, and we need those national integrated energy and climate plans to be there to show the investors that, okay, if we go there, there's going to be predictability, and there's going to be an operating environment that allows us to develop a mature marketplace and a willing cooperation base. So there's homework to be done on the side of the contracting parties, and there's homework to be done on the EU side. Because, as was said, some of the financial instruments that we have are not entirely fit for purpose. We, of course, have the coal regions in transition, which is hopefully going to help in the process of adjustment in the Western Balkans. We want to expand the EU's know-how, make it available in the partner regions and countries. And we also want to use the available financial instruments to de-risk, to incentivize the right type of investment by the larger MDBs, multilateral development banks, and IFIs, which are interested in helping the region because they understand how important carrying and keeping the contracting parties on board is for the longer term. So I'm personally quite optimistic. I think that the decarbonisation roadmap is not going to be a panacea. There's very little new there. It's all about the acquis that has already been agreed for transposition. But it gives us a clear plan of action with timelines, with dates, and in doing so, I think it will allow us to become more focused on the results, the midterm deliverables, and to appreciate the end goal, which should be the carbon pricing ETS and mobilization of those very important transactions for the purposes of net zero transition. But I think I will stop here, and I look forward to the conversation as we move along. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Bardram. Well, of course, the biggest weight actually falls onto the contracting parties themselves, and Montenegro is actually one of the first contracting parties from the Western Balkans to introduce a carbon pricing mechanism. We see quite a lot of challenges in what effects this introduced mechanism will have in the form that it has been introduced, because we have only 3 players in this cap and trade system in Montenegro, namely the Plevlja power plant, the aluminium plant, as well as a cement factory. But the first 2 are the biggest emitters. Can you tell us, please, what the adoption of the carbon pricing mechanism has had any impact in Montenegro, and what do you foresee to actually be happening in the near future?
Right, Victor, thanks for your invitation. It's my great pleasure to take a part of this panel on behalf of Ministry of Capital Investments and Government of Montenegro. just before we start to talk about carbon pricing, I would just like to tell a couple of things about real situation and real carbon situation in Montenegro, knowing that green transition is most important thing and it's all around us and we need to go on that way. I'm pretty sure, like a small country with all options and all values what we have and need to realize, we can be very, very good example for all the European Union, hoping that we're going to be part of it very soon. So our main producer, as you said, is a coal power plant in a town of Pljevlja, and it's the northern part of the country. And coal plant producing almost half of our total production. Some years it's a 40 to 50%, some years it's over 50. So depending on the hydrology, it's but let's say it's close to 50%. So to do something with our biggest producer, we need to set up social stability in a northern part of the country. That's where is a coal region. Transition organizations are very important for all of us. But the other thing, what is also important, especially in these days when you have skyrocketed prices of electricity, it's how to provide stability of our electrical system. So what we're basically doing, we have a huge renewables potential, and we already started to implement some of the projects. And these projects will be ready for building phase, let's say next year, on the first quarter or in the first half of the year for sure. What is most important project, and we already started with it, it's solar roofing, and that's going to give us a chance to build up a lot of small producers on the place where you're spending that energy, and what is very important for us. So you're not talking about grid, you're not talking about all the problems what you can have with connection, and the way how you can pull out the real produced stable electricity is to produce on the same place where you're spending that energy. So that's our first goal, what we're going to do and what we're going to spread in the next couple of years over every single household where we can do that. So that can be a way how we can reduce production from the coal plant and have the stable system in the same time. And other projects, we have plenty of them. I will not talk too much about single projects because we have a great solar potential. We already running a tender for the solar plant near Podgorica, what we're calling a Velja Brdo. It's first phase is 50 megawatts, and it's going to be much more in the second phase. So we're running a Briska Gora close to Ulcin. It's going to be another 50 megawatts plus 100 in the second phase. Close to Nikšić, we had a wind farm, and it's going to start very soon. In the first quarter of the next year, it's going to be ready to build. And it's a 54 megawatts. I'm talking about small numbers because Montenegro is a very, very small country, but the principle's supposed to be the same for everybody. And again, what I'm saying is, if we have a real support from our European partners, with the good credit lines, with some grants, what we already talked about, if you all can recognize what is our real feel about that, because we want to be your good partner. What we do, we're going to do it together with you. And if we have all of that, if we do single good transition for the northern part of the country, it's going to be very, very easy for all of us in the country and for you to have a good example for everybody, like an example for Ukraine. Everybody will see that like a good way how to do the transition. About pricing, we already we introduced that mechanism a few years ago, and we used to have price what is not matching with the European price. because we just started to implement that, and it's not easy for our economy, especially for the energy company, what is a major company in the country, to put more pressure if you raise up prices. I mean, principle is very important for that, and as soon as we build new capacities and provide more production, so we can finance it. It's easy to add the price and go closer to European rules, but we just need to have more production, to be more efficient with our hydro potential, with all renewables what we have, and then we can go faster and closer to prices what you have in the European Union. So hopefully, with the great talk what I heard from, especially from Mr. Kopac, with the new way what is your idea how to add financing on carbon pricing mechanism, it's going to be much easier for us. If we can have support from that side, it's going to be much easier to implement all of these things in a new renewables project. So we're talking about one cycle. If you picking up money from that credits for CO2 credits, and it's a certain amount, we have your support to add on that fund. We already have that fund. We call it a Eco Fund. So that fund will be rising, and we can set up that most of it will be reused in a new renewables project. Again, I mean, at the end, we are a small country, very small. We have one power plant, coal power plant, which is producing 50% of our electricity, and it's feeding up majority of the northern part of the country in the town Plevna, and it's emitting, it's producing most of CO2 in our country. We know what is the way how we can solve that problem, and we just need real good support from your side, and I'm pretty sure we're going to be a great example for everybody in the region and for everybody in European Union. I'm pretty sure some of the other countries will use our method if we succeed to reach this. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Perunovic, and definitely a takeout. The NGOs have always been there to actually support in our own way and be there for any kind of action. But this is what you said, that the carbon price itself will not drive. We need plans to actually phase out the coal and lower the emissions. So without any proper planning, it will be very hard. So this is what we have been actually advocating quite a lot in the last couple of years, that we need plans, cohesive long-term and short-term plans, and actually how to make that work. Thank you very much. I would like, we have mentioned now the coal region. We've mentioned a specific region, a very beautiful region in Plevna in Montenegro. And we have been talking, Mr. Perunovic mentioned the affected communities and that they have to be taken into account. I would like to ask Miss Zierlod, I hope I'm pronouncing your name well, how can the international organizations and national governments engage with the trade unions to actually ensure the socioeconomic challenges are actually addressed within these efforts of transition?
Yeah, thank you, Victor, and thank you for the invitation to this event. Maybe just quickly before I start responding to your question about Industry All Europe, we are a trade union federation on EU level, representing 7 million workers in the EU, but also in the European neighborhood, including Western Balkan countries, in energy, mining, and manufacturing sectors. So I wanted to say that, and I would like to also start by saying that, of course, when transitioning the energy system of a country, you also have to look into the impact for the wider industry, because industries are dependent on energy input, especially energy-intensive industries like steel, cement, chemicals. And so if you decarbonize the energy system, there will be also an impact for those energy-intensive industries. And they are also, they are in need of abundant energy, and if we look into decarbonization, it will mean electrification, it will mean hydrogen, green hydrogen. So there's a whole process that has to be taken into consideration, because what we want to do is preserving jobs locally. As trade unions, this is really a core issue that we are defending, that local jobs are being created, and that there is a phase-in of new jobs before there is a phase-out of jobs in traditional sectors. It's really important to also ensure that there's a confidence of workers in this project, and also not only workers, but also the future, the young generation that are looking for a job, because we see in some regions where a transition was not planned successfully or was not carried out successfully, that workers are, young people are moving out of the country. Very qualified young people are moving out of the country. One example is Bulgaria, for instance, where a considerable size of the population left the country with high qualifications. So this is something we want to avoid. We want to create jobs locally. And in order to do so, when thinking about the decarbonization roadmap that was mentioned by Mr. Kopacz, but also by Ms. Badam earlier, we need, together with this decarbonization roadmap, we need a framework for the planning of the just transition of workers and communities that really involves all stakeholders, but also especially workers. So we need, as we have it actually, we have the initial framework at the European Union. We have a Just Transition Fund, we have a Just Transition Platform, we have the Coal Regions in Transition Platform. We need really something like that, but even further than that, because what we have at European level is not ideal yet. We have to look at all sectors that are transitioning. It's not only about energy, it's not only about carbon-intensive industries and regions, it's also about decarbonizing our transport sector, so the automotive industry will be affected by the change, just a change from manufacturing of parts and components of the internal combustion engine towards electric vehicles. This will all have an impact on local jobs. So really, a just transition framework is needed that is looking into the entire sectors. We need a mapping of the regions where different industrial sectors are, where jobs will be affected, where jobs will transform. We need really to have an understanding where, a mapping to see what we need to tackle actually at the local level and how we can tackle it and how we can create good jobs and how to ensure that we also have the qualifications for this new jobs. And what we as trade unions are demanding is actually we are creating the transition, the decarbonization. We are working in those sectors that will deliver. It's not only in the energy sector, but also in many sectors like steel and cement that will be crucial in providing also new technologies and equipment. So we need to ensure that the workers have a seat at the table, that there's an anticipation of change, that there's time given, and that we are really consulted from the beginning. and actively involved. It's about transparency, it's about an active dialogue and effective social dialogue with workers, about information and consultation. It's about workers' rights, collective bargaining, because only through collective bargaining can we also ensure that there's quality jobs at the end of the process. And really, again, really what is important to stress is that we really have to look at the local content of especially also renewable energies. As you mentioned, you have a lot of potential for renewable energies, but we really would like to have that, have an impact on the local economy and have local content to the equipment that needs to be rolled out of renewable energy. So we really have to look into this entire process, and again, involving trade unions is key in this process. As said, just transition is not only about ensuring jobs and the number of jobs, it's also about the quality of jobs and the quality of life in the end. And here I think I've finished for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is very important issues that you have actually mentioned. I come from a coal region. I come from Pristina. The coal region is 10 kilometers from the city center, and I know how it is to actually, the communities actually in those regions face the same problems that they have been facing for the last 50 years since the beginning of the work of the coal power plants there. So, few of the things are actually lacking in the process, especially when it comes to the inclusion and timely consultation with the stakeholders. But for this, we have, I believe, online Mirjana Jovanovic from Bosch. Mirjana, hello to Belgrade from Glasgow.
Hello from Belgrade to Glasgow.
Good evening, you, and good to hear you. Mirjana, on the last point, how much are actually you as a CSO, do you see the inclusion of not only the civil society, but also the other stakeholders in all of this just transition debate? Is, for instance, just transition widely discussed in Serbia? Do actually stakeholders know that are affected by the transition, know that they have to be included, or what's your take on this?
Thank you, Victor, for the question. I have been listening to what Ms. Zerold has been saying, what needs to be there when we are talking about energy transition, and to be specific, just transition. And unfortunately, in Serbia, we have almost none of these things. So if we speak about early engagement of all relevant stakeholders in all matters related to energy transition, I must say that this is not the practice. The public and the civil society are included only in the late stages of decision making, when decisions are already pretty much made, and there is not much to be discussed. For example, Serbia is now in the process of developing NECP, and the process started in January, I think, this year. It was only in August that the ministry has opened a public call for participation of CSOs. And my organization, Belgrade Open School, we applied, and now we have this I would say exclusive opportunity to see and participate in this process. But unfortunately, not many organizations were given this opportunity, only 3. And there are no trade unions at this table speaking about energy transition and just energy transition. And just energy transition is not even actually mentioned in the initial draft documents. And this is something that we have been trying to change. We have been discussing with representatives of trade unions in Serbia about this and trying to get them involved in this conversation, but unfortunately they are not officially invited to participate. Many things mentioned I would like to maybe reflect on. There was this saying about having clear targets and all stakeholders being involved in defining these targets. In Serbia, unfortunately, we don't have the decarbonization targets. Well, we don't have them adopted. We did develop a draft low carbon development strategy where we have developed several scenarios. Unfortunately, none of them will bring us to net zero emission in 2050, and this was not adopted. Now we have the new energy strategy and NECP in the process of development, but the wider society is not aware of it, and there is anxiety and anticipation of what is going to be the outcomes of these processes. And we have witnessed this in the protests that coal miners have organized in Kolubara coal region. This is the coal region where I come from, because people are afraid for their jobs. They think that coal mines and coal power plants will be closed within a year or two or next 5 years, and they don't really know what the future holds. And it is exactly for this reason that we need clear targets and clear plans in which everybody knows what lies ahead of us, and everybody knows what they are supposed to do. Otherwise, there is social unrest around energy transition and just energy transition that needs to be avoided. So for this round, maybe just this.
Thank you very much, Mirjana. Very important, and I very much hope that you and your colleagues will be actually able to engage with all of the stakeholders, and you will be invited to the round table and discuss these very much important issues. And an hour has almost flied by, and we have to kind of wrap up this discussion. And nevertheless, I would like to open the floor for one very brief question to which our panelists should answer in 1 minute, if possible. So is there anyone in the room that wants to ask a question? The Mr. there asked first the question, raised the hand.
Mr. Chairman, I'm very grateful to you. And my question is about wood biomass, which is expanding very rapidly as a proportion of renewable energy and in absolute terms. My question to all the panelists: wood bioenergy has provenly much higher emissions than gas and higher even than coal. So will they confirm there are no plans for including this energy source in national decarbonisation plans? Simple question.
Maybe I can just give a couple of comments on, is it working?
Yes.
It's a very interesting question from the perspective of my country, because we're now has just joined the initiative on reforestation, which has been launched on COP here. And basically, the ultimate goal of our policy is to treat the wood with nothing but energy resource. So the whole policy is now targeted to climate protection and reforestation, because we had a very serious problems with the smuggling and uncontrolled wood market generally. So we're not treating now the forestry policy or the wood as a product. It's mostly the element of the protection from the environmental point of view. So in Ukraine, this is not a question, and even if it is part of the roadmap or any decarbonization efforts for us, it will not be a priority at this stage to use that element.
Thank you very much. We have a second question in the room.
As a wrap-up, so Mr. Popish mentioned a few times that a treaty was kind of something to illustrate that eager for further EU integration of neighboring countries. what actions from those countries who are members of the treaty, who have signed it, could be considered from energy community side, from EU side, as again showing up that eager for EU integration? We have heard about CO2 pricing, but might be something else could add on that.
Very briefly, the decarbonization roadmap is going much wider. It goes into LULUCF, for example. So energy community is, wish it or not, wish it, of course, becoming much wider. Enter in and governance regulation enters the area of agriculture, transport, research and development, and so on. So there were, of course, some, let's say, concerns by some stakeholders, also on EU side. Is this not too wide, because energy community should be classical energy, gas, electricity, perhaps energy efficiency, renewables. But I think this is now over, and energy community, I think, has a potential to keep European neighborhood in an integration pace with European Union, and for this it will have to go even much wider than now. I'm somehow years ago I even proposed, don't establish transport community, just merge it with the energy community. This will be easiest. Okay, it happened separately, but doesn't matter. Energy community as a rule-based organization needs a little bit of push for better implementation with this refreshed treaty amendments. It needs a little bit of push through stimulation, through financial assistance, which is of course not on energy community, it's on EU, we don't have money. And I think it can be, with this ambition to go into wider areas, it can be completely sufficient instrument for European Union to expand the whole Green Deal into its neighborhood as well.
Maybe I can't resist, but of course, the integration negotiations consider many, many chapters of the European Treaty. So while I would never be the one to shy away from saying how central climate and energy policies are, there are so many areas of integration negotiations. The energy community does offer a platform for people to demonstrate, for countries to demonstrate that they are in good faith, they are committed to the same objectives, notably the Green Deal, which is the new growth strategy for the Union. But it is yet a part of the bigger parcel. So the bigger accession negotiations have a process of their own, to which the energy community can, of course, make a very useful contribution. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a wide audience online. I am being told to wrap up. Okay. We had a few other questions, but no time. Nevertheless, it is very much clear that there is a will to reach something together. I do not want to sound poetic, but I want to be realistic. There is an amazing and tremendous work to be done with, first of all, strategic planning to what we have to do as not only the contracting parties, but also the EU. Decarbonization roadmap is one takeaway from this session that provides that step-by-step agenda how to reach this. But nevertheless, we have countlessly heard about the importance of financing and understanding how to actually finance this transition and how to support not only the countries, but how the countries can mobilize and how we can actually seek new ways of including financial providers to actually support this transition. Another thing which comes now from the contracting parties' perspective is the need to build credible long-term plans. The introduction of a new acquis in the energy community, especially the governance regulation, obliges us to actually work towards long-term targets, but also have credible 2030 target plans as well. And well, this is not the last, but actually in our book, the first. No transition means anything without the people that this transition actually that this actually serves for. So without the proper inclusion of many stakeholders who actually depend on, will be affected by this transition. We're not talking only about the workers in the coal fields, etc., but we have to understand all the contractors and subcontractors. Even the universities have to change their curricula because we now have to introduce the new methodology of learning how to be more sustainable with energy production, etc. So without the workers and the affected communities, all of this does not actually have any sense. And on that note, I definitely look forward to the Ministerial Council of this year and to actually putting more plans, but much more important, credible actions to actually achieving those plans. Thank you very much for coming here. We'll be here all week.